Welcome to BizBody, where we talk about the art and science of exercise to help you solve movement and pain problems. Welcome back to BizBody, guys. Today we're going to be going back into the ideas of tissue repair and injury. And Brandon brought up a really good idea. It was like, why do we really need to go into understanding tissue repair and damage, or how these tissues may be affecting other tissues of the body? What even is a tissue? A lot of people that when they're training or they're exercising or they're going for their run or they're training other people, do they really think about cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, the whole body, like how all those things are processing? Because when we're talking about injury, in like the previous episode or part, we were talking about like what really is an injury. And then when we've been seeing in the early part of our careers, we would think that, okay, this injury in that tissue has now gone through the different stages in very like normal training certification like NSCA or ACSM. They'll go through 3 stages: inflammation phase, repair phase, remodeling phase. Like the first one goes through a time where it's going to be bleeding, and then it has to stop the bleeding and coagulate so that it's really sticky for a couple of days up to a week, and then that starts to repair to lay down all that collagen, and everyone, like collagen craze. Gotta eat your collagen, drink your collagen,
drink it.
Right?
The matrix happens.
And then realigning the spider web of fibers so that it becomes a stronger type of tissue. In general, that's the fairy tale of remodeling of these tissues. What if it was a tooth? Like, that doesn't recover. Oh, what if it was a stroke? That doesn't really recover very well. What about peripheral nerve blocks when somebody has a hip done?
You mean the Rice method?
The Rice
doesn't like cover all of that.
If you just compress it and elevate it, you'll be
and ice it.
You gotta ice it.
That takes care of everything, right? Because anytime like you look at any of the things that are in the literature, like if you're looking at just basic personal training certifications, right? It's like something gets hurt, you rice it, right? Yeah. Like you rest it, you ice it, you compress it, and you elevate it, right? Because that gets rid of everything. Well, eventually, somebody's then going to walk into your facility, post injury and want to start training again, right? Or, may come in prior to that remodeling phase even happening and ask you to help with that process. And I think that's what we're really getting at is, why is this important to understand these things if you do deal with clientele,
or yourself?
Or like as a personal trainer, you're going to get clients that are going to come in, like especially if you have clients on Monday that do something over the weekend.
What's that bruise?
And they don't want to miss their session, right? And a lot of times their thought process is, well, you can just work around that, or if you're somebody that they really trust, like, can you fix this? Can you help this, right? Like, how many times have you heard that, on a Monday, you're like, so-and-so walked through and they ain't walking so hot. And it's like, what happened?
Yeah.
Well, I did this to my ankle, or I did this to my knee. Like, oh, did you go get it checked out? No, that's why I'm here.
We're some sort of medical professional that can diagnose.
Right.
Like, there's no exercise professional, unless you're an MD, that can diagnose anything.
Right. Which is like, why this, honestly, like when we started talking about this, like, man, you can really get into the weeds with all this stuff.
Yeah.
But why it honestly is important to understand if you deal with normal people, because normal people problems are going to eventually walk through your front door, right?
And how many of these certifications talk about, well, if they're people that are in pain, they should be going to physical therapy or they should see a physician. how many people aren't dealing with some sort of chronic, sensation they do not like? Is when it's like when they say, well, if they're in pain, what is the definition of pain? And that's why defining these things are so important, is the idea that, well, if pain ultimately is a sensation that someone does not like, it's such a broad definition. What it comes down to, it's a sensation that someone does not like.
Right.
And it's graded on a scale of okay, how can I objectively measure a subjective sensation? That's when it gets really tough. So then, if number one, if I have an understanding where I'm at as far as the process of recovery of this injury, where am I in these stages of tissue repair? Am I in like an inflammatory phase where I'm in the first 48 hours to like around, am I like a week out? Am I like a month out? Has a lot of that main regeneration already happened, and now I'm like trying to remodel something? And then what are my expectations of the type of tissue that's going through that? Like, is it central nervous system stuff? Is it peripheral nervous system stuff? Is it tendon stuff? Is it ligament? Like, what do we know about ligament and cartilage remodeling? Like, it doesn't really work very well.
Not yet.
Not yet, right? But there's also some studies out there that are really interesting, like ACL regeneration. Like wow, I didn't realize that could even remodel at all or regenerate without surgery. But they're seeing that can happen. I don't know if it's the same type of materials as it was before. Is it made to be the exact same, or is it like scar tissue versions that are just like a shell of what they formerly were and their strength?
Mm-hmm. I mean, my guess is as good as yours.
Right.
But going back to your point with the whole idea of, if there is an injury and there's this discomfort, pain or the sensation we don't like, mm-hmm. right? And that's to a certain area of the body. A client comes in and says, like, I hurt my shoulder over the weekend. As a practitioner, as a trainer, like, do you take that person and still exercise them? Mm-hmm. And I think that's and then if you choose to do that because you're comfortable in doing such things, like, do you actually try to exercise the injured area? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, do you try to stress the injured area in the hopes of building strength to lessen, certain sensations they don't like? Is that something that you should be doing?
Right.
One. And two, like, if you do it, like, how do you make the decision to do that?
Yeah.
Right?
How I think you're really talking about signal detection and risk stratification. Okay, what part of the injury cycle am I in? If part of my ability to detect has been compromised from the injury, then I may not be accurately reporting what's going through, because my brain is wired to perceive things with what I have to the best of their ability, so that I can navigate my environment and conserve calories based upon that. And then overall, it's like, what is my risk of actually going away from homeostasis, from what is my norm, and how do I know what my norm is if I don't have any baselines?
Right. And I think like what you're talking about is just understanding these different phases of recovery based on the current injury or the current problem, right? It's like the client potentially could feel, or you could feel a certain way, but still be in one of these, recovery processes where if you don't appreciate where they are in that, you could inadvertently, when you're trying to help, set back that rehab process or that recovery process by loading, potentially those tissues and materials too aggressively, too quickly, and the client doesn't have any sensation till later.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the hard part, like, as a, individual that dispenses exercise, is, fully understanding, like, you're taking your clients, you can't feel what they feel, right? your client can give you subjective, ideas of where they are today, right now. And as you start to challenge that system, that can feel okay initially, right? And if I know this person's coming off of a shoulder injury, right? Like I have in the back of my mind, based on what they were diagnosed with, okay, this is typically how long it takes somebody to recover from these things. And I may choose to, my exercises very differently versus somebody who, let's say, had a shoulder injury a year ago, right? We know that, a year versus 2 months is very different in how the system remodels itself, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that, like their sensations any different 2 months out of...
You're also talking about what is the difference between tissue remodeling and information processing, which I think people get really confused with. Because yes, you have these living cells that have to be able to transmit information so that the whole system can say, I'm okay. Right? It's nice catch. Nice catch. So the whole system can say, I'm okay. Right? And if it's not saying I'm okay, what's the difference if the tissue's been remodeled? But say, in order for that tissue to have any idea of its temperature, of the tensions that are being regulated through it, or the pressures that are being regulated through it, the types of nutrients that go in and out of it, because there's receptors for that kind of stuff. And say there was an ankle injury where you have to detect the ground, right? So you roll your ankle and you tear some ligament tissue that has these nerves embedded into it, these nervous system tissue embedded into it. Now, those original sensors are detached from your perception apparatus, to the feedback loops of those guys. And now, say a couple of years later, you have a hip thing on the opposite side. Well, that first foot information thing is now going to be different from the hip information thing, and now those have to work as a unit together. And because you have to use all of it when you're walking, those are all highly sensitive areas of the body that have a large amount of neural real estate. And if anyone ever is interested in looking up a funny word called the homunculus, right? It's or mapping out of how these neural mapping places in the body that are in the spinal cord, in your brain, in the cerebellum, all of representations of how we move in our environment, and organized to say, I'm okay. And if it's not okay, pain, and it's like all the tissues are healed. But the information processing has completely changed, which is wild to see in real time.
Oh yeah, I mean, how many clients, in the past year have we seen that, are in some sort of discomfort or pain, what they would consider pain, but there's no pathology associated with it, right? Where it's like, man, I have a lot of discomfort and a lot of pain in this area, and then when they go and get scans, everything looks normal.
Right.
And it's like, that's weird, right? Why is that the case?
Why is that even happening?
And then, from a professional standpoint, then how do you make decisions based on that? You just push through it, kind of the whole, strength coach mentality. Hey man, you just get it stronger and it gets better. It's you're just going to have to push through it until it gets stronger.
Well, that's what's been really interesting is this idea of, and Greg Mack brought this up from exerciseproed.com, where he talks about local problem equaling local solution, or local intervention equals local solution. And we're already showing, number one, that this is all happening at a systemic level. A lot of these things are happening at a systemic level. It depends on which parts were actually injured and what part of that information processing system with all these feedback loops have been changed over time, because it's I think it's pretty much random, but there are parts of the body that have higher priorities than others. It's feet have different sensors, then hands, then the knees, then your eyes, then your hearing. It's like we already know what happens when you lose your main sensory apparatus over time. People are higher risks of dementia. Like they do not age well when they lose their hearing, right? They lose their sense of reality because it is a sense. Reality is constructed. That is what reality is, constructed in the mind, right? So then how these abilities are now constructed are also a feedback loop orientated process if there's any chance knowing material continuums along with processing continuums. And that's why overall it's like, hey, looking at the whole system instead of saying, hey, my back hurts, work on my back. We've worked on backs over and over and over again with what type of result? I mean,
It's hit and miss.
I would say that, man, people will feel good short term, but then long term, these problems have a tendency to just really change over time. And that's been why looking for a better solution towards holism and an integration of what the whole organism is going through and how they're perceiving it, along with having ways to quantify certain things to have baselines. Now we have qualification and quantification, which is exactly why when you were like, hey, we should probably talk about how our process has changed over time. I think that's a great segue into like, well, what did we do before? What were some of the things that we looked at before as trainers? Thank you for listening to the Biz Body Podcast. To support the show, click and subscribe. If you want to work with Brandon and Keith or want to train at Body Activation, go to body-activation.com and get a hold of us directly. If you're an exercise professional that wants to put all of these ideas into your very own system, check out exerciseproed.com for the Muscle System Specialist course and the Exercise Explorers Club. Exerciseproed.com. Rethink exercise.